Hello, this is Japanese Economic Review Channel. Welcome to the March 2026 Global Trade Performance Briefing. The undeniable highlight is Japan's exports breaking the historic 11 trillion yen mark. Despite complex global dynamics, Japan secured consecutive monthly trade surpluses. Today, we will unpack how a geographic pivot and the global semiconductor cycle are fundamentally redefining our macroeconomic landscape and driving this momentum. Exports surged 11.7% year-over-year to 11 trillion yen, marking a 7-month growth streak. Crucially, export volume increased by 3.9%, proving this momentum is backed by real demand, not just a currency effect. However, a depreciated yen at 156.60 per USD continues to act as a structural multiplier. These factors combine to secure a 667 billion yen trade surplus for a second consecutive month. This chart illustrates the resilience of our trade balance. Since September 2025, we have maintained an accelerating 7-month export growth cycle, culminating in an 11.7% leap this March. Notably, this outbound momentum has outpaced import volatility, allowing us to successfully rebound from January's deficit and establish a clear, consecutive trade surplus window. Our trade is heavily fueled by a global tech loop. Semiconductors and non-ferrous metals lead export drivers, contributing plus 1.6 and plus 1.2 points to overall growth. Concurrently, telecom equipment and non-ferrous inputs are our top import drivers. This highlights a highly integrated cycle. Japan imports raw inputs, processes them, and exports high-value tech components globally. March 2026 represents a historic milestone. Analyzing 567 months of data, global exports achieved their highest value in recorded history. Furthermore, export and import values for the US, Asia, and China set all-time records for any March. This unprecedented throughput of trade capital is fundamentally driven by peak global semiconductor demand and advantageous currency multipliers. Here is a snapshot of our shifting regional architecture. The US showed export growth but a contracting surplus. The EU remains locked in a structural deficit despite strong two-way expansion. The real standout is Asia, functioning as our definitive growth engine with a rapidly expanding surplus. Meanwhile, the long-standing trade deficit with China is successfully narrowing. In the US market, exports resumed growth at plus 3.4%, driven by strong demand for autos and tech manufacturing equipment. However, our overall surplus contracted by 14%. This reduction was not due to poor export performance, but rather an anomalous 346.7% explosion in inbound aircraft procurement, illustrating how isolated sectors can heavily distort broader bilateral balances. EU trade reveals a complex paradox. Demand for Japanese semiconductor parts nearly doubled, up 98.9%, driving an 18.2% surge in total exports. Yet, we are trapped in a 26-month structural deficit. This is largely sustained by a heavy reliance on EU pharmaceuticals and a massive 385.7% spike in aircraft imports, which keeps our bilateral balance stubbornly in the red. Asia is unequivocally the center of gravity for Japan's trade balance. The regional surplus expanded massively by 31.1% to 910.8 billion yen. It functions as a highly integrated loop. We export key raw materials and semiconductor parts, while heavily importing finished communications equipment. This interconnected ecosystem makes Asia our most reliable and profitable regional partner. While we have run a deficit with China for 60 consecutive months, there are positive signs. The trade gap significantly narrowed by 23.9%. This improvement was driven by a sharp 44.1% resurgence in outbound semiconductor manufacturing equipment. Although imports of Chinese telecom equipment remain overwhelmingly high, our high-tech exports are successfully decelerating the deficit. In conclusion, 3 pillars define our trade architecture. First, the currency multiplier at 156 Japanese yen and 60 sen per USD inflates aggregate values. Second, the silicon supercycle unified our trade ledger, with semiconductors driving inbound and outbound flows. Finally, the geographic pivot confirms Asia as our definitive growth engine, effectively offsetting Western market volatility. Thank you for watching the Japanese Economic Review. We look forward to having you with us again.